From Music for All and presented by Yamaha, welcome to Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music. On this episode, the third in our Woman Band Director series, Revolution, we explore the past and future of women band directors in our profession. We welcome Ravinia's chief conductor and the first woman to serve as the head of a major orchestra in the United States, South America, Austria, and Britain, Maestra Marin Alsop. Assistant Professor and Assistant Director of Bands at Rutgers University, Dr. Julia Baumanis. Associate Director of Bands and Director of Athletic Bands at the University of Maryland, Dr. Andrea Brown. Executive Director of El Sistema Colorado and Conductor of the Denver Youth Orchestra, Dr. Ingrid Larragoity-Martin. And Associate Director of Bands at Gulfport High School in Gulfport, Mississippi. And the Middle School Band Coordinator for the Gulfport School District, Professor Dee Dee Pitts. And now, our host of Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music, Dr. Scott Edgar, and series co-host, Dr. Julia Baumanis.
Hi, my name's Scott Edgar. Welcome to our next episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. As you've seen the past 2 months, we've been focusing on the realities of what it means to be a woman band director in our field. Today we're finishing that series, and we have an amazing guest to join us who has been revolutionary in understanding and forging paths for women in our field, our profession, and in music at large. To introduce that guest and to tell a little bit more about the series, I welcome Dr. Julia Baumanis from Rutgers.
Thanks, Scott. In our first episode of our series titled Healing, we, the panelists, shared our stories and experiences as women band directors. In our second episode, titled Evolution, we discussed individual breakthroughs that each of us have had in our careers, as well as strategies that we hope are helpful to others as they navigate our field. In this third episode, titled Revolution, we are honored to have a guest who really needs no introduction. Maestra Alsop is the first and only woman awarded the Kusevitsky Conducting Prize by the Tanglewood Music Center, was named the 2021 Classical Woman of the Year by American Public Media's Performance Today, appointed chief conductor of the Vienna Radio Symphony Orchestra, making her the first woman to head a Viennese orchestra, has assumed the title of music director laureate and OrchKids founder of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, OrchKids being a groundbreaking music education program for Baltimore's most disadvantaged youth. She promotes and nurtures the careers of her fellow female conductors, founding the Taki Concordia Conducting Fellowship in 2002, which was renamed in her honor as the Taki Alsop Conducting Fellowship in 2020. Most recently, The Conductor, a documentary about her life, debuted at New York's 2021 Tribeca Film Festival and has since inspired conductors around the world. And in 2020, she was named Chief Conductor and Curator of the Ravinia Festival. And these are just a few of her accomplishments, so we are so honored to have her here today. Please welcome Maestra Alsop. So, Maestra Alsop, I'm going to start with our questions today, and my question to you is this. After watching The Conductor, I was so inspired by your perseverance through your journey to where you are now. And in speaking to my female conducting students and reflecting on my current place in my own journey, the one question I am always asked is, how do I overcome imposter syndrome, or the idea that I'm not good enough, I'm not old enough, or I'm only here because I am diverse from everyone else in my field? I find that this feeling of not quite belonging is especially prevalent for my younger female students. So I wonder if you can offer some advice on how to overcome these feelings of imposter syndrome for our female conductors.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that you have to remember that imposter syndrome is something that we put upon ourselves. It's not something that's put externally upon us. So it's a matter of really feeling, I think, feeling capable enough and prepared enough. And maybe for some people, there's no preparation that really is quite enough. I think the more prepared I am, the more I've anticipated the situation and visualized it, the more committed I am to the music, the less I can ever feel that I don't deserve to be there. I think people will always find excuses to to validate why they didn't get something. Whether people say, well, she got that because she's a woman, or she got that because she's a person of color. People always do this. And, I have to confess, I've been guilty of that a few times too. So we have to, I think we have to just accept that that's something that other people do in order to make them feel less inferior and in order to bolster themselves. So I think being a conductor is all about having self-awareness, owning the space that you deserve to be there. As long as you're not thinking about yourself, but you're thinking about the music, then I don't think this will be too much of a problem.
Thank you. It's comforting to know that I've sort of figured out that this is something else. This is some other person. I've had a couple of people in my life say, well, I'm not going to get that and you got that because you're a woman of color,
Right,
and
exactly.
you're a woman.
Right.
And they say it sort of tongue in cheek, but not really, right?
There's really nothing funny about that, saying that.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that you even deserve to say you realize, of course, that there's nothing funny about what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinarily sexist and racist. So maybe get with the program. Sorry. I mean, it's time to speak out. We can't really tolerate this kind of injustice any longer. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
No, I mean it's so like powerful to hear somebody say that, because it's something that I feel like I've been shouting from the rooftops in my own brain.
Maybe
but
today I just got a text I could share with you from one of my Taki awardees, who said that she decided not to accept a job because for a variety of reasons. So she talked to the manager of the orchestra today, who said, they're going to move on to hire someone else. That he was surprised that the orchestra all voted for her because they had a woman once before and they didn't like her. And I said, oh, but what happens when they have a man that they don't like? Do they not hire men any longer? I mean, hello. So
you start whittling down your choices at that point, right?
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah. No, I love that, and it's interesting because it's a new position where I am, and I'm finally in a place where I feel like my reach is farther now, and these things have come up, and I feel like I used to, and Ingrid, who has known me for many years, can speak to this. I feel like I used to kind of bat these questions away. Well, I'm only here to just do my job, but now that my reach is so much greater, I'm finding myself having to use my position, and I do so happily to say, maybe we shouldn't put this on us like this. Maybe it is, there's nothing gendered about the box I step on, right? So why even put that into the mix?
Right,
but
exactly.
This has been, I think, within the last 2 years, sort of a revolution for me personally. I'm a little bit younger in the field of college teaching, and it's something that, I don't know, just being a child of two immigrants, I sort of fly under the radar. So it's something that I've had to work on personally, and projects like this and conversations like this have really helped me personally speak out a little bit more and have more confidence in that. Yeah, so thank you for your words on imposter syndrome.
No, of course.
Maestro Alsop, I know from myself personally, representation matters. If I had not been able to see myself in someone else doing what I'm doing at this point, I don't feel like I would be where I am. And it was all because of one person. It's very difficult for people to see themselves outside of themselves, to see themselves in a different situation. Being that you are so influential in the conducting world and music education world as a whole, what advice would you give to women currently in the field to help prepare and promote equality and representation for us?
Well, I think that representation will not happen without intentionality. And I think by stating that intentionality, people people are willing to hold their own feet to the fire. So I don't believe it's enough just to say, well, I think we'll try to hire a few more women or try to hire some people of color. I mean, I really believe that you have to make an exact commitment. We are committed to hiring an equal number of women on the podium as we are men, and we're fully committed to 25% of those people, or maybe it's 25% of the total number being people of color. So that you say, I'm just pulling random numbers, but so that there is a deliverable and a measurable. And I think without that, it's all just talk. So I believe that we need to be intentional about it, each one of us. We have to try to convince the decision makers that this is the right way to move toward the future. I also believe that every decision we make should fall under a certain marquee philosophy. For me, that's all about access and inclusion. Does this further access? Does this further inclusion? If not, let's not do it. So I think it has to be extremely intentional. That's my thought anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree wholeheartedly. I was in a situation here recently where I was the first African American female to conduct our Mississippi Lions All-State Band in our state. In Mississippi, that's the highest honor for our students. And it's been going on for years. I mean, decades and decades and decades. And there are so many deserving female conductors, African American female conductors, who could have been on that podium many years before I got the opportunity. I was a part of this ensemble, and I never thought as a student that I could be standing on that podium, because I never once saw an African American female standing in front of me in that capacity at that level. So it is definitely an intentionality. And I don't know that's all the time decisions are made with intentionality. I think they're made oftentimes from a place of, oh, this person just happens to be here, or just happens to be in the right place at somewhat of the right time. So I do believe that intentionality is highly important. But speaking from a collective, this was a collective, a music education world collection of people, not just Black, white, women, men, every one of us. Is there, other than being intentional, is there anything else that the people who are not the underserved group that we're speaking about can do, the white male? Is there anything that they can do from your perspective to help push the agenda forward?
Well, I mean, this is I suppose the point is that those are the people who seem to still hold the decision-making power. So they have to really be out front in the lead to gather enough consensus so that everybody is on board with the plan, and also have the fortitude and the strength to really withstand any kind of criticism that might ensue from a decision like that, because there will be criticism. So that's my feeling.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So, Maestra, we kind of spoke about this a little bit a couple days ago, but I think it's an important aspect of agency. And you spoke on it when Julia asked her question. You said owning your space, and that's been something that's been difficult for me. And I don't know if it's a culture or part of my personality, but I always feel when I approach something confident, because I am prepared and I feel good about it and I'm excited about the possibilities. And I feel that when I'm in the room with people who are hiring, or people who colleagues and peers, I have to make myself smaller to make other people comfortable, because I'm always told I'm too big, or sometimes aggressive, or there's always some kind of reaction to the confidence of doing something. And then it's not until after it's done, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know you can do that. Or, just the interesting aspect of how my question is connected to that imposter syndrome. I think for me, a lot of that has come from being quiet and hiding, because early on I realized my mannerisms, or English is my second language, learning English and speaking, and maybe not saying the right word all the time, and being corrected, and being not in love all the time, and my hair or whatever it is taught me that I didn't fit in. I wasn't part of that picture, right? So automatically, for a long time in my career, when I entered a room, I made myself smaller, whatever that meant, whether it was straightening my hair, dressing the way I thought other people dressed, holding my tongue until I was invited to speak several times. I'm not like that anymore. However, it always interests me when I hear someone like Julia, who's younger, and I knew her when she was in high school, seeing her grow up and go through those same things in that same way, and many other students. And I teach a lot of BIPOC and trans students who are trying to develop their identity at the same time as their musical existence, right, in this profession, and so many things being against them and making them feel small, and that they have to be small in order to be allowed in the room, so that eventually maybe they'll notice the wallflower in the back and then push them forward, which generally doesn't happen.
Well, I've never really observed a man coming into a room in a very ostentatious, gregarious way, being told that he's too loud. Have you? I mean, maybe when kids behave that way, but as adults, it's embraced. It means you have, you inhabit your skin, you're strong. I feel like people are always looking for something to use to minimize women, especially strong women. I think it's very difficult in the face of that effort to maintain your own identity and your own belief. Because, of course, I think one of the great qualities about you and about women in general is that we tend to want to please people. So when someone says you're too loud, you automatically try to bring your volume down. But I think this is, it's a complicated, excuse me, I have allergies, so I'm trying to take a cough drop. You have a complicated series of events that happens, and then as human beings, we internalize that as though this is our responsibility to make everyone else feel comfortable. And then we assume that we make them comfortable by not being what they told us they don't want us to be. My view is that I'm really happy that you no longer feel that need to try to please everyone. I think that's something we have to let go of, that it's more important to be true to ourselves, to be authentic, than to make other people comfortable. Because you can never make everyone comfortable, As soon as you're quiet, they're going to say, well, you're too quiet. So then you have to be outgoing, and then you're too outgoing. There's always something. I mean, I would say that I grew up being too, just capital TOO. I would say I was too everything. Too enthusiastic, I enjoyed music too much. I was too much of a smart little brat. These kinds of things. I mean, I was always, everything about me was too much. And yeah, this idea that whatever you are, it isn't quite right for the situation. And I think the great thing about music is that it's non-partisan, or it should be, and it's non-judgmental. So it can sustain all different kinds of people of different colors, people of different sizes, people of different ages. And, the only thing I can assure you of is that as soon as you get past the issues that people have with you now, they'll have other issues with you. So there's never going to be a moment when someone says, you are perfect in this moment, exactly the way you are. So try to be your own best advocate and not take on everybody else's, projections onto you, because there's always going to be something. When I stand in front of an orchestra of 100 people, I know that, I listen, on a good day, maybe 50 of them are remotely, predisposed toward liking my beat or, engaging with me. And the other 50% are thinking, who is this person? There's never, if you start worrying about what other people think of you, I think it becomes self-indulgent, and it really does a disservice to what we're there for, which is to serve the music. So always put the music first, and try to feel your strengths, because you know your strengths better than anyone else.
Thank you for that. I that resonated a lot with me, and something you just mentioned about music not caring, right? It's music, and if we go in it for music, that's what ended up changing for me later, a little bit late in life, but finally, where I wrote inside all of my scores, it says it's not about you. So when I open the score, that's the first thing that it says every time, because I was so worried about that, because so much of who I was, I don't want to say torn away, it wasn't that dramatic, but just erased. So much was erased that eventually I figured, if I just focus on what I'm doing and music, they're going to like it or not. And I think it's so important for people to hear that and to understand and feel that, regardless of what they're facing, so that they can do the thing that they love to do, that we love to do. There's a naivety in me that's like, why don't we get it? It's music. And, I always say, it's music. Enjoy it. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Maestro, one of the other guests that we've had on this show is Jonathan Rush, and we were talking to Jonathan a little bit about what it looked like for him to come to his space and to understand his role. And his blunt answer was, I never saw anyone who looked like me on the podium, and the reason that I got into conducting was through Bugs Bunny. He saw Leopold, the old Looney Tunes cartoon, as his entry point. And we had a really nice conversation with him about this understanding of tradition versus moving the profession forward in a space that embraces, as you and Dee Dee just spoke to, representation and diversity. And I've heard you speak a little bit about your current Ode to Joy project. And to me, don't let me put anything out on the table that's not there, but it seems to me like it's not an either or, that it can be an and, where we can embrace our tradition and the wonderful music that is centric to our orchestral tradition, while moving things forward with the intentionality that you spoke to.
Yeah, but this is not an easy question, right? I mean, there's a sort of sacrosanct quality to classical music, anyway, that I think is extraordinarily destructive, because music is not it's not preserved under a glass case, and you look at it and you're not allowed to touch it or change it. Music is constant. That's what I love about music. It's constantly being reimagined and recreated and re-experienced. So if you're sitting listening to Beethoven 9 today in 2022, you're not going to have the same reaction that someone in 1827 had. The words, when we think about language changes dramatically through the decades. I mean, I always remember back when at the end of the year, I think it's maybe it's the Webster dictionary, they put out the new words of the year. So there are constantly new words being added to the dictionary. I thought, but how can that be? We speak our language and that's it. But no, it's constantly evolving. And, this is just a small way of saying that what Schiller wrote in late 1700s was a dramatic and revolutionary idea in the moment about individuality, about freedom, about unity, about tolerance. These were all concepts that no one in human history had discussed publicly before. So people would have said, wow, this is an unbelievable poem. Well, first of all, it's in German, so people don't really know what is being sung. But I wanted to simulate that same kind of, oh, wow, these concepts. Because I feel that, or briefly, that the changes in human history were so dramatic that they needed to be articulated in the same, under the same themes that Beethoven espoused. The theme of humanity joining together, the theme of, united we can overcome, the theme of equality and tolerance. I had, especially as we watched the world moving more toward those goals, instead of in the recent months moving away from them, I thought, let's try to bring this concept into the voice of the 21st century by commissioning new texts, not translations, but new texts that use these themes, but are of today. And really, you would have thought I said, okay, I'm now going to, I don't know, what would be what would be the worst thing I could say? I can't even imagine, but you would have thought I committed the worst crime in history by wanting to reimagine and perform Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with a new text. And there could be nothing worse than me commissioning a rap artist to write a text. What? Now, tell me, who are you to judge whether wordsmith Anthony Parker, whether his words are as valuable in today's world as Schiller's were, 200 years ago? Who are you to judge that? And also without ever hearing it, judging. This just, to me, it smacks of everything that's wrong in classical music. Everything that's wrong, or maybe everything that's wrong in the world, is that we're going to judge each other long before we even know what we're judging. And before walking in somebody's shoes, we're going to decide what's best for them, and what you can and can't do, and who can and can't do. And, to me, music is about humanity. It's not about perfection. It's not about, a glass case. It's about connection. It's about evolution. It's about people coming together, uniting. And so, for me, I think that this attitude that classical music can never be touched or changed. Really, I think all these people need to get a grip. It's just, this is, okay, I understand if you're doing surgery, you don't want to make a mistake, but we're talking about making music, come on, people, and let's enjoy it and stop making it so officious and elitist. And so, for me, it was a revelation really to see all the haters come out when I did this Ode to Joy project. I'm just speaking about that because, particularly, it was particularly vitriolic in terms of me asking Anthony to do this text. I don't think they had quite the same reaction to, I asked also Tracy K. Smith, who is the former U.S. Poet Laureate, to do a text. I think they couldn't be as condescending about her. I'm sure if they could even grasp the text that I've had written in Zulu, they would also have a problem with it. because there are people that don't want classical music ever to change because the system serves them. It's a system, and we need to change the system because it shouldn't even be a system. It needs to be an industry about people, by people, for people, and an industry that's constantly moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, that was a little bit, I hope that wasn't too strong.
Please don't apologize. Please don't apologize. I think that is a nice segue into one of the questions we had hoped to ask to sort of open up more dialogue from everybody on the call. I believe that what we do is we're in the business of people. Just as you're saying, it's about connection. We're in the business of building relationships. And I tell my students all the time, my job does not exist without you here in front of me. I'm just some weirdo waving my arms if there's not people in front of me. I teach a lot of music education majors who are hoping to become band and orchestra directors. And one of the things that's on all of our minds is that we're in the middle of a teacher shortage, and people are leaving the profession, they're leaving music education in incredible amounts. So I wondered if you had some thoughts that you could share about the current state of K through 12 music education and how we could encourage more of our teachers to stay, more of our students to stay and pursue this incredibly important line of work, life really.
Well, I mean, this is a huge question, I think, systemically throughout society about, education is under such intense attack that I understand the people that say, okay, I did everything I can, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I hope that especially the young people coming into education won't feel handcuffed as they are, by suddenly all this banning of books and banning of words and banning of discussion. And, I mean, come on, people. This is the 21st century. We really need to stop trying to put it back to the 1700s. I mean, we need to, and, to me, in a way, if arts could be the foundation of our education system, we would have a much better shot, I think, at engaging kids and creating successful futures for them. I'm not sure about how to interest young people into going into education as a profession. I know that through the OrCids program in Baltimore, that many of the kids who graduated from that program are now getting their degrees in music education because they want to give back to the community what they got from this program. So I'm encouraged about that, but I certainly, I empathize and sympathize with everybody that this is a huge challenge. I'm just not on the front lines in terms of that, so I don't really experience it too much directly.
It's incredible talking to my students about what I have to train them on. We of course always talk about the music and leading first, and we teach that teaching itself is an art form. You have an audience, the people in front of you, and you have to be able to communicate your message in a way that people understand. But then I also have to talk about how to move your curriculum around for testing. I have to talk about school shooting safety techniques. I have to talk about how to handle a parent meeting when it's a 22-year-old in the classroom and they don't have children of their own, and a right parent comes in and says, "How dare you teach my child X, Y, and Z?" So there's a lot, and I'm not sure any of us have an answer. I mean, that's where I teach and that's where I try to figure it out, but I listen a lot to my high school, middle school, elementary school teachers. So I don't know, Dee Dee, if you have something maybe as a person on the front lines, it's tough.
It is very difficult. It's not grim and bleak, but it is a difficult situation, and I think part of being successful, not just in the music education field, but in education in general, It's understanding your environment and understanding how to deal within those things. Um, you were talking about the parent conferences and the active shooter trainings, and we start school next week. We start school next Thursday, Tuesday for teacher days, and one of the things that we have to do as teachers is go in and learn how to make sure our students are safe if an active shooter comes on campus, and we have to learn how to talk to our parents and help them understand why we're going through these processes. So oftentimes people leave the education field not because they don't enjoy the activity of teaching. It's because of all the things that surround the activity of teaching that they have to learn to deal with. And one of the things that helped me early on in the K-12 education field, because that's where I've been my entire career, was having a strong mentor who understood. And I think we've talked about this before, but just having somebody who understood and who had been through some of the things that I was going through, that I could call and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or I've got this situation, or I've got this child that's giving me a little bit of difficulty. For me, and I'll be a little bit transparent here. When I first started working at the high school, we had a group of students who had never had an African American female conduct them, so they were intimidated, which turned into parent conferences about how I was being unfair to the child. But I wasn't being unfair. I had high standards, and I didn't accept anything less than what I felt was the absolute best that student could give. And no yelling and screaming. I just don't do that. But so all these kinds of things come to play when you're talking about education and how do we educate the music education? How do we do this? But it's so much more. And having a mentor who could just kind of calm me down, number one, and say, this is not you, this is them. This is not something that you can control. This is something that somebody else has learned how to deal with you. And I think we talked about earlier, just being okay in your skin and being okay in your space and not cowering down because someone else is not comfortable around you. Just having those types of people in your corner to help you push forward, it was very helpful for me.
Thank you all so much for your patience with me. I'm Andrea Brown. I'm the Associate Director of Bands at the University of Maryland. I know you were just there with NOI. I got to catch a couple of rehearsals from the back of the auditorium. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this panel and this group and so I really appreciate you all being able to allow me to jump in at this late hour over here. My question has to do really with some, I guess, classism in little C classical music. So I think rather uniquely, the world of small C classical music is pretty stratified in that younger, less experienced conductors, and that usually includes a lot of women conductors, have to move through the process of leading pops and children's concerts before they're offered opportunities conducting more serious or series concerts. These seem to be thought of as, not as important to the organizations, even though they're usually more accessible and more inclusive and more popular, for lack of a better term. And I know that this inclusivity and access is something that's important to you as well. And so I wondered what your thoughts were about this situation or it's tradition or kind of what's has been happening. Maybe it's changing, but what does it say about the world of classical music as a whole? And do you think this may eventually change?
Tell me a little bit more about it. Are you an advocate for this kind of, getting more experience before you're placed under that kind of pressure, or what is your thinking on that?
I think it's more. I do appreciate that that it provides experience, but it's more from about the way I see it as in the profession and the way it's packaged is that these are lesser concerts when they're actually music that is more accessible and inclusive to a broader audience. And so I think there's a disconnect in a way in the opportunities for the conductors versus the music as it reaches the audience. And I know that that's at least the way that it's happening, or it has been happening for quite a while. And I just wondered kind of what your thoughts about that disconnect are.
Yeah, I mean that's so. I'm sort of now I'm hearing the many dimensions to your question, which is really a good one. That I think that it's interesting because often the lowest job on the totem pole is the most difficult job. So when a young conductor is engaged as an assistant conductor, for example, they often have to do programs on only one rehearsal. They're not equipped really to do this. They have to pro kids. They have to speak with young people. They have to do jazz programs. They have to do crossover programs. They have to do this program. They have to do 4th of July, about that. And they're really not equipped at all to be doing any of these, but they are considered sort of more junior kinds of opportunities. And I do think that as music directors, it's important for us to say, I really value all of these aspects, and I want to do some of those programs myself. And I also want to try to offer more guidance to the younger conductors coming up through these programs. Because, of course, what happens is they also start to internalize the idea that these are not important opportunities. I mean, there's an inherent, there's also an inherent prejudice, might be too strong, but it's sort of judgment about bands from the classical music industry, and, as it turns out, of course, especially in the United States, the band situation is probably one of the most sophisticated musical entities that exists. More new music is probably written for bands than any other ensemble. Bands, they commit the right amount of rehearsal time. They're in it for the right reasons. Band directors have to do just as much repertoire as a orchestral conductor, if not more. So I've never been very good with this labeling of and hierarchy of importance. I think that anytime you reach out, and people say, well, what are all these students going to do? And I say, I think if you find joy in conducting a youth orchestra, that's just as valuable as me here conducting Chicago Symphony. And maybe even more valuable, because you're actually going to impact these kids' trajectory. I can't impact these musicians. They've decided what they're doing. They know what they're doing. You can actually help form their futures and give them insight and give them mentorship and give them, a sense of possibility. So I'm a great believer that, I think all concerts are equal. I guess that's my feeling. So, and, people always said, because I love jazz, and, you can't do jazz in the concert. It's just all these rules again about in order to keep the system a closed system, and also to keep the museum quality going. We got to keep it really dusty. That's how people approach it. So those are my thoughts on that.
And I appreciate hearing your thoughts about that. And again, I know for you that access and that the audience has to the programs and how they receive those is important. I've heard you speak about it. I've read your writings about it, and so I guess I'm wondering if there are others in the profession that might follow your lead in feeling that all of these concerts are equal, and that they do you think that would ever be something that might change, that we would see music directors conducting more pops concerts?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the issues is that until women are allowed into the top roles, we won't know the answer to this. Because at the moment, we're really marginalized still. I mean, the only reason there are more women on the podium right now is it's obvious. It's because of the Me Too movement, because everyone's feet were held to the fire. I mean, that's the only reason. When people say to me, wow, look at all these talented women. And I mean, I really have to bite my tongue not to say, well, 20 years ago, there were this many talented women too. You just didn't let them in, or you didn't give them an opportunity, right? So I think that, we have to remain vigilant about pushing the doors open. I think until things really change at the top levels, because that's how you can impact the lower levels, is from the top. I don't think, and I mean, I'm I'm well aware that I'm roundly criticized for talking to the audience. God forbid, dissecting music so people can have access to it, or doing, being super engaged with a program and starting a program like Orchids, or a program like the Rusty Musicians, to work with non-professional musicians. I realize that somehow by doing these things, people like to say, well, your musicianship has now diminished. Of course, it hasn't at all. I mean, I'm still the same musician I was before all these. If anything, I would say it actually elevated my experiences. But as long as we still have this system in place that's constantly trying to keep it the same and not let it evolve, we're going to have a problem.
Maestra Alsop, this entire series is dedicated to embracing tough conversations, and to have this panel here, we were really honored to have these voices amplified. That's what social and emotional learning means to me, is that it helps people understand their identity and provide agency, and put the microphone in their space so we can put this message out to a greater audience. My curiosity is understanding that there are still so many battles to fight that we have been fighting for decades, centuries. But for you, what are things that we need more dialogue and action around right now?
Well, I think intentionality is probably my number one topic of concern, because creating a more equal landscape was not a choice. It was something people had to do. They were forced to do. So how do we turn that from something that's imposed into something that's embraced? That's very important to me. I also, as an artist who's maturing, let's put it that way, I'm also keenly aware now of yet another barrier that people throw up for women, which is that women over a certain age are not valuable. So that's something that I think is going to become part of my stump speech, and I think that that's really important, because, when I say to my manager, he says, "Oh, you got to do this and this," and I say, "Well, you mean, am I imitating all those old ladies on the podium? Oh, right, there aren't any. Yeah. So let's get back with that, right?" So, but I see a lot of old guys, lots. So, let's try to get to that place now for women as well, so that they're respected. So it's not just, listen, I think young women should all have great opportunities, but there are women in their 30s, 40s, 50s who have a wealth of experience, who deserve to have opportunities. They shouldn't just be forgotten. So that's sort of what I'm thinking about these days.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Well, as we start to wrap everything up in this, not only this invaluable episode, but this entire series, Understanding Realities for Women Band Directors in the Field, this could not have happened without the support of Ravinia Reach, Teach, Play, our friends at Music for All, and I would be remiss without thanking Dr. Julia Baumanis, who this was early on her vision to put these people together in a space to have this dialogue. So, Dr. Baumanis, to you.
I mean, like everybody on this call, I've never had a female teacher in anything, especially music. So thank you, Scott, for finding me in that hallway in Midwest and say, "Hey, I have this podcast. What are we going to do with it?" because I'm hoping that more of this happens, and I'm hoping that more of these opportunities happen, and we could use our positions of power to say, no, we're here, and we always have been, and here's your microphone. So thank you, Scott, for doing this for us. And Maestra Alsop, I watched the conductor for like the umpteenth time this morning with coffee in preparation for this, and I know that everybody else on this call has these same feelings to have us be in your space for this time. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Great questions and great dialogue. Thank you.
My friends, thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. On behalf of Maestra Alsop and this amazing panel, please be safe and be well and live in the music. Take care. For me, SEL is all about agency. It's all about putting microphones in front of everyone so that voices are amplified. I cannot express my gratitude enough to this amazing panel who has shown us the importance of healing, evolution, and finally, revolution. We need to have a space where everyone can be seen, heard, and inspired within our field of music education. For Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar.